This is the cerebral brain. It's divided into two hemispheres down the longitudinal fissures. There's a right and a left hemisphere. Each hemisphere is divided into lobes. There's the frontal lobe underneath the frontal bone, parietal lobe, temporal lobe, and in the back the occipital lobe. This outer covering of the cerebrum is called cortex. It's a thin layer of neurons, only a couple of millimeters thick, and it's a large sheet, and in order to fit that into the skull it has to be folded, and so there's bumps and grooves. The bumps are called the gyrus and the grooves are sulcus. There's two sulci that you have to know: the central sulcus, which separates the frontal lobe from the parietal lobe, and the lateral sulcus, which separates the temporal lobe from the frontal lobe and the parietal lobe. And there's two gyri you have to know by name. The precentral gyrus is anterior to the central sulcus. The postcentral gyrus is posterior to the central sulcus. In the back of the brain, you can also see the cerebellum, which is separated from the cerebrum by the transverse fissure.
Like he just showed us that when he was over here. They need to say that.
Looking at the mid-sagittal section, you can see it again.
I don't know if the audio is
all in front, which is the cortex, the frontal lobe, the parietal
looks like the video though. It looks like really funny. It shows exactly. Yeah.
Temporal lobe, the cerebellum, and we can also see some deeper structures. So this is the brain stem with the medulla oblongata and the pons, the midbrain area with the superior and inferior colliculus. Traveling through the midbrain is the central aqueduct, carrying cerebrospinal fluid to the fourth ventricle, which is between the cerebellum and the brain stem.
It works. Look
Above
at
the
it.
midbrain's the diencephalon, which is the thalamus and the hypothalamus. And the thalamus is forming the walls of the third ventricle, and the hypothalamus is forming the floor of the third ventricle. So it's been destroyed by the sectioning, but it would be just this side of the thalamus here. There's a couple structures associated with the thalamus: the intermediate mass of the thalamus, the pineal gland, and the fornix. With the hypothalamus, there's a couple of structures that you can see here: the mammillary body, the optic chiasma, the optic nerve. Above the fornix is the septum pellucidum, which is a thin membrane that separates the two lateral ventricles. And above that is the corpus callosum, which are the axons that are traveling from one hemisphere of the cerebrum to the other. Okay, so here's that mid-sagittal section again. In this case, we can see that there's no septum pellucidum, and we can see into the lateral ventricle. And in addition, we can see the pituitary that's just hanging off the hypothalamus. It's connected to the hypothalamus by a stalk called the infundibulum. If we kind of take off this front part of the cortex, we can see into the lateral sulcus. So the lateral sulcus is here, and we can see deep into the lateral sulcus is some more cortex, which is insulated by the frontal lobes and the temporal lobes, and it's called the insular cortex, or insula. You can also see the basal nuclei here and here, with the internal capsule fibers traveling through the middle of them. Let's see, take that off. So there's another view. Basal nuclei, internal capsule, and then this is thalamus. There's the fornix. This is the back view of the superior and inferior colliculus. Here again we have the cerebellum. Here's the cerebral peduncle, the pons, and the medulla oblongata. And then if we kind of come back up here, you can there's optic nerve,
I'm never
and this is
gonna
the
know what
optic
that
tract.